Hi everyone, and welcome to today's TechGirl workshop from junior to senior. I'm Kani Talabani, community editor at Hard Topics, and one of the people working behind the scenes to run the TechGirl community. I'll be your moderator for the session. Now, today's conversation is all about how to navigate and accelerate your career growth in the tech industry. So we're going beyond just technical skills and diving into leadership, mindset, and strategy. Now, we're joined by two incredible speakers. We have Anna Verdian and Lauren Daly, who have each forged really inspiring paths in tech and leadership. And they'll be sharing their insights, experiences, and advice on everything from career roadblock to mentorship and stepping into leadership with confidence. Now, before we dive into the panel, I'll introduce each of our speakers with a quick slide and a few words about them. So, first up, we have Lauren Daly. Now, Lauren is a director of application delivery at Ardena Advisory with almost 20 years of experience driving change across industries. Now, she's passionate about modern tech like AI, low code, and she's followed a non-traditional path building a career without a formal IT degree. She's also a mentor and co-founder of Ardena's Women in Tech group. And fun fact, this is her first time speaking at a TechGirl event, so we're super excited to have her here. And next up, we have Anna Verdian. Now, Anna is a senior executive with a global experience in driving digital transformation and innovation. Now, Anna's a tech leader known for leading with purpose, building strong partnerships, and bringing teams together to make big ideas happen. Now, Anna was also a speaker at last year's TechGirl Masterclass on digital skills. So if she looks familiar, that's why. So let's jump right in and kick things off with something foundational, career progression. Anna, Lauren, I'd love to know, what key skills or experiences helped you transition from a junior or mid-level role to a leadership position?
So Anna, do you want to kick off first or?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Kani, for having us here. It's an absolute honor and privilege to be invited back. I love these sessions. In terms of the skills, what helped me grow my career, I would say probably number one, if I look back, has been actually being the combination of being curious, not just about my direct role, not just about my direct job that I was responsible for doing, but about the business that I was in, about the industry at large, and really just approaching people who were working in a variety of different functions, speaking to them, learning from them, asking them questions about how they do, how does that connect overall in the wider business, and how does that help drive business forward. So that would probably be number one thing, just curiosity. And then combination of that curiosity with being open to the opportunities that came up. Frankly, my career has gone down a path that I would have never, ever been able to predict at 20 years old. And I have taken on amazing roles and amazing opportunities in a variety of different companies, specifically because I was not really seeing my path as set in stone, where I just wanted to progress my career in a particular vertical, in a particular industry. But I was very open about exploring a variety of different opportunities. So openness combined with curiosity can create some magic.
Lauren, do you have a similar view there?
I definitely share, what Anna's alluded to, which is, really being curious. I would probably add to that to say it wasn't just for me about being curious. It's also been about putting up my hand and offering to help, and doing it persistently. And what I mean by that is I made sure that there was no job that I was not willing to take on. And it sounds bizarre, but if someone needed help putting an Excel sheet together and I knew that I had the ability to help them with that, I would do it. Even if it wasn't part of my job role or my job description, I was the type of person that if I knew people were going to work late in a team, and even if I wasn't part of that project team, I was the type of person who would work with that, would say, you know what, let's do it together. I'm here to help you. Let's print our documents together. Let's put it into the files together. Let's do some of these things that I've done. And through that, it not only created such a great opportunity for me to learn and to understand other processes or other things that teams were working on, but it also gave me an opportunity to create a network of peers and colleagues that would want to work with me in the future and also consider me for other opportunities, especially when I was more junior in certain roles. It just, they were like, oh, you know what, we've actually got this new role. And Lauren, why don't you consider applying that? Because we think you'd be great for that role. Even though in most of those instances, I never had either the qualifications or the technical background that job ad was looking for. They looked at me because they knew that I was someone that they got on well with, that was curious and that was willing to put in the effort. And I can't tell you how much that will always override in any job interview experience scenario.
So then both, I have a question for you. If you're in a non-formal leadership role, how would you then describe your leadership qualities, essentially? How would you get that across to someone?
Could you clarify if you're in a leadership or non-formal leadership role?
If you're in a non-formal leadership role, how do you demonstrate to other tech professionals your leadership qualities if you're trying to prove yourself, essentially?
So from my perspective, I actually think everyone is a leader. And I know that that's going to sound a little bit maybe cliche. But what I mean by that is I think it's important to differentiate the difference between being a leader and being a manager. So often a manager is potentially someone who has been given some level of authority through the role or the rank or the title. But just because you're a manager, that doesn't preclude you, that doesn't mean that that's the only people that can be leaders. Anyone can be a leader in any kind of organization or even in society. Sometimes part of being a leader is thinking about the ways in which you show up for others. Very much for me, part of leadership is actually kind of understanding what it means to be a servant leader. So that often means not trying to be the person who tells someone what to do, but someone who supports someone else achieving the end game or the outcome or the goal that they're looking for. So how to be a leader would be to look for those moments and look for those opportunities, whether it be internal in an organization that you're working for, whether it be even in the institutions you might be studying with, such as putting up your hand for the student body or being part of a specific kind of charity initiative, or even looking at what you can do broader in the industry. There are so many great opportunities to be part of making a difference beyond just your work environment that would give you leadership experience and skills that you could then actually come back from those experiences and demonstrate in your own organization. And being able to say, well, you know what, I helped to actually put together a team of people to fundraise something. That's an amazing thing to do. And that requires leadership. So for me, that's something I would really encourage people to think about, is not to confuse or conflate management and leadership, and think about that actually they can demonstrate leadership, which will allow them to be able to build the skills that you actually need one day when you are a manager.
And how would you advise someone to demonstrate their leadership?
I would say so a few things came to my mind. One, fundamentally, I think in organizations, especially when you have a number of junior talent, right? The people who stand out as future leaders or leaders in the moment are those who are able to be reliable and reliable executors. So what I mean by this is actually people who don't necessarily always wait to be asked or to be assigned a particular task. People who do see a need and are able and willing to just put a starting proposal together to act rather than talk about it, rather than always rely on the manager or someone else to give them direction, etc. People who actually come to you as a leader and are saying, hey, I thought we didn't have clarity here, or I realized we were missing an update here. I've put together this proposal. Do you have any notes? So people who are willing to just take a step and just execute and just try to solve a problem, any problem that they're seeing within the organization. And even if it's not a 100% perfect solution, even if it's just the first step, those are people who usually tend to stand out. And those are usually people who become the more driven senior leaders, who are also able to bring teams together with them, because they're not sitting and waiting until everything is clarified, until every step of the way is clear and there is a map to how you're going to act. People who are willing to just take that first step, just build on it, and also who are able to take feedback really well. And what I mean by this is, sometimes when you do take that first step and you do put something together, that serves as an initial draft, essentially, right? So it's very easy to then give feedback and say, oh, great, this is how we can improve it. If you happen to get all defensive about this and you kind of go, well, I did take this step and no one seems to appreciate, they want me to do more and more and more, you're probably not going to get too far. Whereas if you're able to take it as, well, I'm so glad this has sparked this conversation and now we're actually building on it and we're improving on it as a team, then that is a clear sign of leadership without using any of those big words and big terms, or even discussing leadership. Leadership is essentially about being able to demonstrate that you're willing to execute, you're willing to take those steps and do whatever it takes to actually bring a solution forward.
Lauren, I can see you nodding there.
I was just thinking about what Anna was saying about, being willing and also not taking things personally when you're given feedback. That was definitely something that I know I struggled with in my early stages of my career. And probably just to kind of talk about a specific experience, I found myself being, because I was the type of person who was putting up my hand and was taking on more responsibility, I think in kind of early stages of my career, there was a bit of a mismatch between, I was really good at executing and I became really good at executing, and my skill set really developed well because of that. So I nearly then found myself being promoted into a management role, and I started to have people reporting to me. And I was quite young. I was 24 at the time. And I remember I had people that were reporting into me that were older than me. And I found myself in the situation where I thought, well, now because I'm a manager, it means I need to be telling people what to do. And that is, and it was quite an interesting learning experience in my career at the time, because it did take a bit of time for my boss at the time to kind of spend time with me, explaining to me that I haven't put you in this role because I want you to tell people what to do. I've put you in this role because I see such great potential in you. But if you can't get your team to work with you because you think you need to do everything, or you think you need to tell them what to do, you're never going to be successful. And I really resonated with that point that Anna was talking about, which is, making sure that when you're getting that feedback, don't take feedback personally, don't take it as criticism, see this as an opportunity for improvement and learning, and being able to embrace that, because it really will not only shape how you are able to progress in your career, but it'll also shape the relationships that you have with others around you.
And that's interesting then, Lauren, because I was thinking about the people who, they tick all the boxes in terms of leadership qualities and aspects, but they don't feel that they're deserving of that promotion going to a leadership role. So the people who are experiencing imposter syndrome, let's say, what advice would you give them if they feel like they're not deserving of progressing to that kind of position?
So I want to let everyone in on a secret, a really, really big secret. All of us are faking it till we make it. That is honestly just the truth. I don't know anyone who's ever 100% met the job specification they're being asked to do. And if you think about it, that's probably because most jobs are evolving. Most of us are evolving. And as you evolve in terms of your skill set, your responsibilities tend to change. Organizations are evolving and maturing and changing all the time. So even the types of things that might have been priorities for an organization changes over time. And that means that for me, I've seen that I've never ever been in a role that I have walked into saying, I've got this. And actually, I think that if you are walking into a role and you say, I've got this, I'm going to, I know everything that there is to know about what I need to do here, then I would probably challenge someone back and say, are you actually then challenging yourself enough? Are you stretching yourself enough? There's quite a lot of research out there as well about, if you look at specifically how men versus women actually apply for roles, most men, funny enough, will apply for roles where they feel that they've met 50% of the brief. Most women will only apply for a role where they feel that they've met at, closer to 90% of the brief. And so I really want to challenge everyone to think about that. Actually, most of us are just faking it a little bit till we make it. And I don't mean that in a very literal way, that I'm completely underqualified and I can't do the roles. But there's never ever going to be a role that you should be walking into saying, I can do this. If someone else has belief and faith and has given you that opportunity, then why do you not want to, believe that in yourself? So value what you can add and think a bit differently about, that how you feeling is actually the right way to feel when you are moving into a new role or being given a new opportunity.
Anna, what are your strategies then for overcoming that kind of imposter syndrome?
I would love to build on what Lauren said, because I do agree with it, but there are also elements where I see slightly differently. And the bits that I see slightly differently, kind of, you used the word there where you said, what about people who don't feel they're deserving of the opportunity? Now, it would be wonderful if we could say that every opportunity in the world is given to someone who is most deserving. That's not really the case. I think sometimes it's about, you get the opportunities that you want the most. So for me, it's not so much about believing that you deserve this opportunity. It's about having the knowledge and confidence about the fact that you want this opportunity and you're willing to do whatever it takes to make it a success. And what I mean by this, and obviously within reason, right? Whatever it takes, goes without saying. What I mean by this is, in personal life, I love challenging myself to do things that are difficult, that I have never done, that I'm completely out of my depth in. And the reason I love to do this is because it is this constant muscle of working on something that absolutely terrifies you, where you have no idea how to do it. You're not, whether it's climbing a mountain, whether it's running a huge race, whatever it might be, learning a new sport. So if you combine the willingness to sometimes look a little bit silly, because let's face it, when you are taking on something that you don't yet have experience in, where you're not yet good at that, you're not yet proficient, you're not really going to look your best. You're not going to look like a professional yet. So if you're willing to go down the route of having a little bit of humility, asking for help, and that's part of doing whatever it takes, right? Not trying to pretend that you have all the answers, but approaching it with humility, asking for help, being willing to actually invest your time in learning, what do I need to be able to succeed in this opportunity? How can I approach this methodically, where what's my plan of action? How am I going to set myself up for success? Who are the people who are really good at this that I can approach and ask to, for tips? How can I train for this? What course can I take? What type of industry events can I attend? That is what usually guarantees success. So being willing to say, I don't yet know how to do this, but I am absolutely determined to make this the most successful opportunity it has ever been. For me, that's a way to combat that, rather than kind of indulging in that feeling of whether or not I deserve the opportunity. You get opportunities that you generally, no one just hands out opportunities out of nowhere, right? We generally tend to work hard, we ask for it, we advocate for it, we apply for these jobs. So if you've gone into that trouble, then being able to also see it through, rather than indulging in this endless thought process of, did I deserve it, did I not, can I, do I know everything or not? Let's face it, we don't ever have all the answers in any given situation, right? Even if you've done a particular job many times before, you're in a new context, you're in a new organization, new types of challenges, new types of people. So you're going to have to learn to navigate your way through that new dynamic anyway. So being willing to approach it with humility, but then also being determined to take the steps necessary is my recipe for success.
I like how you mentioned confidence there, Anna. So I guess this is directed at both of you. What really helps boost your confidence before, whether it's a meeting or an interview or just a general situation? What's one thing that really helps you?
For me personally, probably just the network of allies that I've built up over time. So it's been both meeting women who are generally women who work with me, or even men that work with me, or individuals that I've reported into or that I've worked and are perhaps more senior than me, people that I have asked to mentor me. When I'm really struggling with something, I generally will reach out to one of them and will look to them to give me, and generally I might be struggling with a situation that I probably have some emotional feelings around. That's, I think, one of the things that I probably struggle with the most, is where I might be feeling something around a situation and needing someone to help me actually contextualize it and bring me back to the facts and give me a different viewpoint. But also in that, I find that when you reach out to people who you know that you can trust to be honest with you, they also are very good at giving you a sense of confidence in yourself, that they can play it back and say, well, you did this well, but maybe you could handle that differently. Or, you know what, actually, go get them, like, so I think really making sure that you are building up a network of allies, and whether that be in your current organizations, in your current, even from a university perspective, is so important. There are, and it doesn't, and I think that's probably the interesting thing for me. It does, your network of allies is not necessarily your friends. Your network of allies can be women that, or men that you have a work relationship with, or people that you've worked with before, who you will network with, who you might share updates with on LinkedIn. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same person who you're going to go and have a glass of wine at the pub with and, go and have some fun with. Those, I sometimes think we confuse the two things. And it's not to say that you can't go to your friends and they're not the people who are going to build you up. Of course they are. But sometimes you want to know that you've actually got people that you can rely on in a bit more of a professional sense, that understand the industry or understand the kind of challenge that you're facing, that you can lean on and ask them to also prop you up and give you a bit of context or a little bit of courage. And that's generally what I think has resounded really, really well for me, is building up a really great network of allies that I know that when I'm struggling with stuff, I can go to. And and that's something that I think all of us can do.
Anna, do you have a network of allies?
I absolutely do, and I second that. And actually, looking back at my career, I wish I wish someone had told me this back when I was starting my career first, because it took me a while to realize the importance and the value of networking and building that network of allies and building those relationships. And actually, the more your career progresses and the more senior you become in an organization, the more that network of allies and your relationships are really considered what I would call your leadership capital. That's how you get things done. That's how you're able to make an impact. So it's crucial. I would add though to that, just perhaps not not just in a work environment. I think outside of developing those relationships and having allies, what's key, and to go back to your question of what gives confidence, in a moment when I'm not feeling most confident and in a moment when I'm having doubts or I'm nervous, what really tremendously helps is having practices outside work that I can rely on to draw confidence. So whether that's getting out for a walk, whether it's if you are into any kind of sport, it's relying. So having that balance and not forgetting that even though we are showing up as professionals at work, we are still human beings, and it's important to be able to really bring your person and know yourself. What are the things that actually give you energy, propel you forward? So if it's a 15-minute run, then great, book the time before before a really crucial meeting, get out, do that, and then you'll bring that energy back. So it's really important to know what practices you as a person have that can help.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, Anna, when you're saying that, it reminds me of Marie Kondo, and she talks about when you're cleaning out your closet, think about what brings you joy, you know. And I love what you were saying is that we sometimes, I think, especially in our early stages of our career, we can feel like the only way in which we can succeed is by being successful in our career, nearly. And actually, you know, life is a series of different experiences and experiments. And, you know, there are going to be times that your career is not going to be where you feel it needs to be potentially, and you are going to struggle. And I agree wholeheartedly with you that knowing that I could lean in on my moments of joy and the practices of joy that I have, whether it actually also be just phoning a friend and being able to have friendships and or cooking or doing certain other things that bring me joy, just you can't undervalue those things.
Absolutely. I can make it even specific, given we're talking to young women and girls, and being a woman myself, I have always had this notion of, you know, physicality sometimes matters. So if you happen to be working with someone who's much taller, stronger, etc., and you're especially facing a difficult, challenging situation, sometimes subconsciously you tend to feel smaller and not quite as strong. So I had that situation where, as much as we talk about the importance of allies and people who can build you up, in those moments, sometimes it doesn't work, because even though they're telling you, you got this, you're in the right, your mind doesn't quite believe in this. So what worked for me in those moments in particular was actually going and specifically picking up heavy dumbbells and just spending 20 minutes exercising with those, because just from a physical standpoint, that gave me the feeling of strength. And then I felt like, okay, now I am ready to face the person who happens to just from a physical standpoint, who I perceive to be much stronger, much more challenging, and therefore I needed to somehow trick my brain into using that strength, that perceived strength, to be able to make my point and face the situation successfully.
Lauren, do you pick up a set of dumbbells every now and then? Get your strength up?
I have. Although I would probably say that I sometimes try and do stuff that in my mind is a little bit, maybe in my mind feels a little bit crazy to me, but where I kind of go and I enter in these adventure races, or I went and I did a mountain bike ride, and I was not in the best place in my career, and I was just like, you know what, I need something else to focus on. Okay, well, you know what, I've always liked doing triathlons. Let me go and enter an Ironman. And I did. And I trained and I did do it. It did take me, you know, 2 years to get to that point, but I think that that's what Anna's saying is so really important, is you've got to find those moments of joy, but you've got to make sure that you've got other things beyond your career that are inspiring you and motivating you, and that you can lean on to draw on that courage or that motivation or that sense of whatever it is that you're needing right now in your life, because your career is not the only thing that you will have. You will have many other things, so don't make it the only thing that you have.
And going back to that inspiration aspect then, Lauren, was there anyone like a mentor or a sponsor in your life who significantly impacted your career and helped you in that sense?
I've had some incredible, I would say, mentors in my life. And I've also would say I've had some really awful, I would say both the mentors that I've had in my life have usually been in the form of a boss. Not always, but quite often. And I've also had some terrible bosses. And I think that that's probably what I would say, is that it's definitely a mixed bag that you will probably experience in your career. So if I had to balance it out, I would say, for me, being able to make sure that you have created a good connection with those around you, but also those that you work with or work for in this instance, is really quite important in your career. People don't leave jobs, they tend to leave bosses. And I 100% believe that. And that probably comes back to a slightly different point, which for me was, I actually wish that I sometimes had had the courage, that where I knew that the type of leader or the type of manager that I had was not working for me, because actually what I found is that my value as an individual and the organization's value and what they valued in managers or leaders was very, very different to what I was looking to bring to the table. That's where I think a lot of my challenges came in. And so when I took the courage to leave those situations, I always then found that actually when I stood true to my value, it actually aligned me to the people that I was looking for to be good mentors and to be good allies for me, because it had meant that I was looking for people that I had shared values with. And so I think that that's probably something that I look back in my career, and I wish sometimes that I'd had more courage in some of those situations to actually have left maybe a bit sooner, and to not worried about some of the things that I think it, especially in my early 20s, where you've got some freedom, you don't generally have kids, you don't have all of these other responsibilities as you do later in life. And I think there was a part of me that was like, oh well, I have to stick out this job because it's going to, it's an important job title on my CV. And actually I should have just gone and found something else, because it wasn't worth the pain and the frustration that I felt in those moments, being in an environment with someone who didn't align to the values that I was looking to, or that I had as an employee. And that meant that I didn't show up in the right way in that organization. I was never going to show up in the right way.
So it sounds like you've had a mixed bag of mentors there, Lauren. Anna, have you had the same experience?
I do have some fantastic mentors, but I would say in the earlier days of my career, I perhaps similar to Lauren, I relied on learning from managers. And it was only quite coincidentally, just thanks to my curiosity, which is why that was the first thing that I mentioned, that I happened to meet people beyond my direct manager, beyond my direct function, and then realize, oh, I was learning this particular skill from this person and this other skill from that other person. And it was much later in my career where I realized the value of proactively seeking mentors. But I do want to caveat this with, sometimes I have been mentoring for many, many years, both people within my organizations as well as externally. I'm part of many different communities and contribute as a mentor a lot. What I will say, what's separate, I think there is something to be done, to be said about a mentee taking responsibility and being proactive as well. So as a mentor, what you're willing to do is be generous with your time and be generous with your skill, and be willing to work with to help the person in whatever it is that they want to be able to take away from that relationship. It is on the mentee to decide what is it that they're seeking. Why are they seeking that mentorship? So the times when I haven't felt most fulfilled as a mentee, where I have felt like I wasn't getting as much out of my mentor, have probably been times in my earlier career where I was approaching it more as a, well, you're my manager, and therefore you will show me all the ropes and you will share all this experience that will kind of help me naturally progress. That's not how it works. Usually the most effective mentorship relationships are formed and forged through being able to identify and say, oh, this person seems to be really good at this particular skill or in this particular area, and approaching the person and saying, Lauren, may I please shadow you or learn from you how you approach that particular area? It removes the pressure from the mentor from being able to guess what is it that they should be giving the mentee, but also it allows them for a much more open, directed, and a more fruitful partnership there. So I have had some fantastic mentors, but I've only had those once I had the realization of how to approach mentors, and that only came once I started mentoring, because I realized just how bizarre and daunting it is when someone approaches you and says, will you be my mentor, and you're willing and to give the energy, the time, and create the space, but they have no idea what they want out of that relationship, and there it's a guess. You can't really succeed in that.
And I think probably something that I would add to what Anna's saying is that I think there's this element of feeling like, oh, well, you know, like maybe if I've got a mentor, it's going to tick that box, and then I'm like on some sort of the right path in some bizarre way. And you know, you don't need to have a mentor at every part of your career for your whole career for you to be successful in your career, if that makes sense. So, you know, if you don't have a specific need that you've identified that you're looking for mentorship on, don't feel the need to go and have a mentor for the sake of having a mentor, because you're going to waste your time. You're going to waste the mentor's time. And I mean that in a nice way. You're not going to get the value out of that relationship. It's going to dissipate. And then you're going to potentially have missed an opportunity in that when you actually do need a mentor or do need that person, they're going to say, well, I don't really know what this person wants from me, so I'm not going to really invest in a relationship. So I would encourage, you know, women to be cautious of, you know, if you've got a specific need, a specific problem, a specific challenge, or you are looking for general kind of support around how you can show up or do certain things, that really works well from a mentorship perspective. I would also add a little bit to that to say, sometimes I think you might not be looking for mentorship and you're looking for sponsorship. And it's probably also quite important to know where you are looking for mentorship, which is someone who's going to help you manage and deal with the problem and think about the problem together, so that they can give you support around how you deal with that or move forward in developing a skill or handling a difficult situation, versus when you are actually looking to align yourself to a specific person or a body or something like that, because you see this as an opportunity for sponsorship in your career. And what sponsorship means is helping you to look at getting exposure to more opportunities or to be involved in other things that can, you know, give you more experiences to build up skill sets or opportunity or coming across opportunities in your career. So I do think that's quite important that we also talk about making sure you define whether you're looking for one or the other.
So it's more about being transparent then and approaching someone with exactly what you have in mind rather than making it a guessing game. I don't know what you think about that, Anna.
I was just going to revert back as just a slight comment on the topic of defining. I wanted to say, even though, as I mentioned, I have some people, fantastic people that I have long considered mentors, there's not a single formal relationship where they're officially classed as a mentor. It's more, as I said, it's an organic relationship where you happen to see someone, and it doesn't always have to be someone that's more senior than you are, or more and more experienced. You just need to be willing to know what is it that you want to learn in that particular moment, where do you need help, and who is best suited to help you actually learn about that particular area. So the definition there, as Lauren alluded to, it is also important, and sometimes not necessarily labeling things, but just saying, this is what I want to learn, can I learn from you, is probably a great approach.
And speaking of one of the learning points, I guess, to building your professional career, how important is it for junior to mid-level professionals to network with others in that industry? You know, what advice would you give to someone who wants to build professional relationships with others?
You go, Anna. Yeah, I think you're probably going to touch on something that I know you mentioned earlier.
I think it's super important to network throughout the entirety of your career, and very often more junior people and younger people tend to see this as not, it's quite uncomfortable. I don't really enjoy being in a situation where I don't know anyone. It feels awkward. I don't really know what specifically to talk about. What I have learned and what I'm continuing to learn and work on is that discomfort might get a bit better, but it still stays. We're all fundamentally, more comfortable talking to people we do know, being in environments that are familiar. But making an effort and seeing that as a required skill for a professional in any area, in any industry, helps, because it helps reframe it, where if you want to know about what's going on in your industry, you need to have connections across different companies that are in your industry. If you want to have cross-industry insights and understand what is the top of mind currently within a particular field, right? Whether it's technology, whether it's engineering, whether it's data, again, you want to be able to be connected to a variety of different people. So I would say it's hugely important to, if you happen to, like most of us, feel awkward and that's not necessarily your strength, reframe it as a professional skill that you just need to practice, learn, and get better at. And the more senior you are, the bigger the value of your network generally tends to be. You'd be hard pressed to find any leader, any successful leader, who gets hired into a new job and isn't expected to or able to bring a team together with them, right? That's one of the top things that you're able to do as a leader. So networking is hugely important at all levels. And lastly, if you don't know how to start those conversations, generally a tip, it always helps asking people about themselves. So what is it that they do? How did they get to where they are? What are they currently working on? Most people tend to love talking about themselves. So that's a fail proof, which is, again, a tip someone gave me a long, long time ago.
I completely agree with what Anna's saying. And I think that's, I suppose I remember, it's interesting for me because no one in my early stages of my career told me the value of a network or learning how to network. And I think networking sometimes feels a bit like an odd thing to say as a skill, but actually it is a skill, and it's a skill that I probably want to say that for many people you actually develop over time. And so I get the sense sometimes that there's this belief that, oh, well, this person, they just got the gift of the gab. They can have a conversation with anyone, it's easy for them. But actually, the truth is, for most people, it's not easy. It's not easy to network. It's not easy to go up to strangers and strike up a conversation. I'm someone who am and do feel that I'm more of an introvert, and I think a number of people probably would, I really struggled with that. And I probably would say that when I started to realize that there was value in creating a network, and actually I needed to create a network because I needed support around challenges that I was facing, that no one else was doing the job that I was doing in the organization I was in, and I didn't feel comfortable going to people and asking them for advice necessarily, because I knew that they were looking to me to come up with certain solutions or answers. So I started to kind of explore building out a network, and I only did it in my 30s. I didn't do it in my 20s. And that's something I really look back and think, oh, I should have just had a bit more courage to maybe build up a network. So it is definitely a skill you can learn. There's lots of really great YouTube videos and things that you can go and you can watch that can give you the, good one-liners to start with. So for example, I try not ask people, what do you do? Because, that sometimes can be a very flat conversation. I might ask someone, tell me something exciting that you've been working on recently. So it's how you can also change the frame of the conversation. Those are all great skills to learn. And then if you don't have yourself set up on LinkedIn as a profile, that's the one thing I would say. If you leave today, please go and set yourself up with, make sure you invest time in setting your LinkedIn profile up. It really actually is important. It's a great tool to be able to create and to manage a network around your LinkedIn profile. So 100%, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile or you're not spending time on LinkedIn managing your profile, you really need to be doing that. I would recommend.
So, Lauren, you mentioned YouTube videos there. Anna, do you have any recommendations for like resources, like podcasts, books that could help people with honing those networking skills or just approaching people in general for when it comes to these events?
Networking skills. Not necessarily. I don't. It's been quite a long time since I've looked into resources on networking. However, what I one tip that I would like to just share out there, as Lauren said, LinkedIn, 100%. I support that. Important. Have a profile. Approach people, but equally make it a point to really build a network where you are you know the person. Take 15 minutes for an introductory call if they happen to be in another country. Meet for a coffee. So make it a point to be present. And rather than, I think where I personally felt previously like, okay, if I go to a networking event, it's quite overwhelming. How am I supposed to make 20 new connections and even remember who they are, what they do, what their names are? And actually it got much better, much more fulfilling, and much more genuine and authentic when I started just focusing on one or two meaningful conversations at every event, one or two meaningful connections where you will remember each other following that event, where you are able to stay in touch. It doesn't have to be weekly, monthly, or but occasionally you check in, you do stay in touch. And over time, if you start in your 20s, by the time you're in your 40s, there's a good chance you're going to have a great network and be really well connected, but connected in a meaningful way, and not just have thousands of people that you've never met, you don't know who they are, but they happen to be a connection.
Yeah, I completely resonate with what you're saying, Anna. There's make sure that what you're doing is going to create value. It's not about volume, and I also think that it's important that, one of the things that is particularly my pet hate is if someone kind of reaches out to me and the first thing they want, they either want to pitch me something or they want to, ask me for a job or something like that. So it's important, I think, also when you're creating these networks and these relationships, not to necessarily go into thinking, okay, what do I want out of this, as an immediate thing, to see the network as rather nearly like expanding your layers of opportunities that you get to be exposed to over time. But you can only kind of, nearly like, if you think about it from a game show perspective, you can kind of only see what's behind door number one when you've kind of done the first kind of bits of the game in some way, and put some money into the kitty in your own relationship with that specific person.
So, both taking all this into account, then, what is one piece of career advice that you would give to your younger self just starting out in the industry?
Do you want to go, Anna?
Sure. I will go with the quote that I started off with, which is really just a reflection in preparation to this call and thinking about what would I have wanted to know. I think it's very easy to see someone who happens to have the job that you might want one day, or happens to be perceived as successful, and just see that one aspect of their success and say, this is what I want. The reality of it is any path, whatever we deem successful, requires quite a number of sacrifices, trade-offs that we make, and clear priorities that we're working towards. So before following someone else's definition, before saying this is where I want to get to, right, in 20 years time or 5 years, whatever your timeline, it's really important to actually take the time and say, okay, I know that I'm going to have to make trade-off decisions. What are my non-negotiables? And what, in terms of both of what I want to accomplish, but also of what I'm not willing to give up to accomplish something. So what's going to hold me back from just completely over-indexing on one area or another. So knowing what does success mean to you specifically. Is it a job title? Is it a particular level of seniority, which is very easy and straightforward to do? But again, any person you see that is successful in one area or another has probably given up a number of other areas of their life. If they happen to be amazing at running a company, perhaps they aren't always able to be present with their friends or family, or attend their children's plays at school, etc. So, and if they are able to do that, then they're perhaps not over-indexing there. They're making a trade-off decision somewhere else. So the one piece of advice I would say is getting clarity at each step of what is it that I truly want and why do I want it? Do I want it because I'm just seeing someone else have it and it's perceived as successful? Or does it really matter to me? And then being willing to work hard to prioritize that and to make the trade-off decisions that are required to achieve anything, to really be successful in anything. You have to be willing to make some certain sacrifices, to make sure that those sacrifices are the right ones for what you want.
I think from my side, and I also really resonate with what Anna's saying. I would probably expand a little bit to what she's saying, which is that I wish in some way that I remember phoning my mom in my mid-20s and telling her that I thought I was having not a midlife crisis, a quarter life crisis, because growing up, I thought, oh, well, I need to be an MD. I decided at 15 I needed to be an MD of a company at 25, and I got to 25 and I wasn't an MD. And in hindsight, at 25, it still felt like it was a realistic thing to say. But in knowing what I know now, I realized that was a really naive view of the world. And not only was it naive view of the world, but it also meant that I hadn't really thought about what actually mattered to me. Was it the fact that I just felt like I needed to be an MD to feel like I'd achieved something? And I think that there was an element of that in what I was saying, instead of actually really thinking about what are the things that matter to me, what are the things that I value and want to spend time on. And rather, I think at that point, I got some really great kind of support and redirection in my life. I got in touch with someone who became a mentor for me for about 2 years and gave me some really great coaching. And that helped me to really reframe and think differently about what success means to me. And I've realized in that actually no job title was ever going to be that important to me, because that's not what I wanted out of my life. I wanted to feel like I was doing something that was purposeful, that I really enjoyed being involved in projects, because I love the transformation aspect of projects and being able to support people to be able to adopt technology and those kinds of things. And so that helped me to kind of reframe not only what mattered to me, but also reframe what were the things that I wanted to spend time on, and then to make sure that I really refocused my attention to being able to pursue those things. So I think very much aligned to what Anna's saying is don't overthink some of these things. Don't try and be, say, oh, well, I want to be the next, Sheryl Sandberg CEO. Think about, what actually matters to you. Focus on the next kind of 1 or 2 moves, and just enjoy life, enjoy the ride. And, your career is going to do lots of different things that you're not going to anticipate. But if you're grounded in your values and what matters to you, you'll never be disappointed.
Okay, we've covered a lot of great topics here today, but now I'm just conscious of time. We're going to shift into our final portion of the session, which is a short Q&A. So we've gathered a few questions in advance from our audience, and I'll be reading a few of these for Anna and Lauren to answer. So whichever one of you wants to, just go straight for it. Here's one that we received earlier. So this person has said, how do you deal with people not taking you seriously, especially when you're younger or newer in the field? Either of you can take this one.
So I started my career when I was 19 years old. And similar to what Lauren mentioned earlier today, I had to work with people who were much more experienced, much more senior than I, and much older as well. And I think looking back, I was so concerned about them taking me seriously. But I think when I look back, it wasn't so much about how most people are professionals, and they will be respectful. And if they aren't, then of course that's a separate story, and you need to deal with that. But there is no one who will approach someone and not take you seriously purely because of your age, if they truly are professional, and are showing up as professionals in the workplace. It's more about how we perceive ourselves. And I think that's where I would say having humility, not setting too high of expectations and not trying too hard to come across as someone you're not, is hugely beneficial and helpful. So if you do happen to me, in my case, a 19-year-old who has just started their career and is just there willing to learn, lean into that. That's quite endearing, and people do take you seriously because they realize you're being authentic. They have been 19, 20 years old as well, and they know what it's like. So they're never going to try and make it a point to somehow not take you seriously purely because you happen to be younger or have less experience.
Lauren, do you feel the same way?
I do. Maybe some of the things that I would say, just some tactical advice around that, would be when I found myself in a situation where I felt that someone wasn't, maybe engaging with me in the right way that I expected, I would kind of do two things. So the one thing is to try and have more of a personal conversation with that person, not about how they're not taking you seriously, but find a way to create a relationship with that person that might be about creating a common understanding of what your similar interests could be. I've had people that were much older than me, in their 60s, reporting into me when I was in my 20s. And I mean, you can imagine just generationally the kind of gap. And what we would talk about is, one of the conversations I recall was talking about, their grandchildren and their grandkids. And at the time, I was looking at getting married, and so was their grandchild getting married. And, we bonded over, this whole concept of marriage and, what she needed to wear. And, it was a really beautiful moment in my life to create this relationship with someone who originally kind of was like, well, what are you going to teach me? What do you know? And actually just changing that a little bit more about getting her to see me as a person and understanding her as a person, having those engaging moments that we had, and we actually created a really great relationship. But also then it helped me to kind of reframe with them that I kind of positioned myself to say, okay, you are the expert. I'm here to help you. So tell me, as the expert, how can I help you? So sometimes it's a little bit about reframing, creating that relationship, figuring out how to reframe what you want to support that person with. And then I would probably say is the other thing that I would do is to just kind of take myself back to, and it's a really hard exercise to do, which is to just remind myself that from a people behavior perspective, most people judge themselves on their intent and others on their behavior. And actually what you need to do is you need to judge yourself on your behavior and others on their intent. And what that means is just kind of taking a moment to put yourself in that person's shoes and play back why that person might be projecting something on you, and figure out, is it your perception? Is it real? Or is there a way in which you might be behaving that's causing that person to maybe make you feel like they're not taking you seriously?
Okay, lovely. I think we have time for one really quick one. Someone asks, if you were starting out now, what would you focus on first to build a solid foundation and actually stand out? Anna, do you want to take this one?
Sure.
It's a tricky question. Yeah. I was being that. I was thinking like, oh, okay.
I was thinking back to the whole 1 hour of conversation prior. I'm going to say on that. but jokes aside, I would say trying to really get as much understanding and practical experience in a variety of different aspects of how a business is run. So not just focusing on one thing, unless you are 100% certain that you want nothing else in your career, but you only want to grow in that particular narrow field, I would say the early days of your career are the best time to really try and cast a wide net of a variety of experience. And that doesn't mean you need to go and work in every function, by the way. It just means volunteering for a project, for a number of different projects, and getting involved and active with a number of projects that touch on different aspects of the business, so that you really build that solid understanding, which most people tend to go through 20 years of their career and still only know about one or two particular functions, right? So if you can build that wider understanding of how your business works and how your industry works, you'll most likely become indispensable.
Lovely. Lauren, do you want to add something really quickly to that one as well?
All I would say is that to do what Anna says that you should do, and then also focus on creating your network around you, because it really, really will matter the longer you are in your career, to be able to feel like you've got relationships that you can either seek out for support, sponsorship, or upskilling, to do that as well.
Lovely. Well, that brings us to the end of our session. Huge thank you to Anna and Lauren, and to all of you for tuning in. Now, if you found the session interesting and want to stay updated on others like this one, or even you just want to be part of a community of other girls interested in tech, please do check out our new TechGirl website and sign up to be part of our community if you aren't already. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you at the next event.
Bye.
Thank you, Penny.